I was 10 years old, walking barefoot in a rich neighborhood, with a little plastic tray of candy, trying to get enough money so my mom and my grandma could buy medicine, when I knocked on this giant mansion door and saw something inside that blew my whole life open in 1 second, and I'm talking like instantly, like heartbeat to heartbreak. I stepped into this house I had no business being in: marble floors, flowers that probably cost more than our rent. And then I saw a gold frame on the wall, with a picture of a woman smiling, holding the arm of this rich man, and that woman was my mother. So yeah, that's how this starts. Me standing in a billionaire's foyer going, "Why is my mom's picture in your house?" And him looking at me like he just saw a ghost crawl out of his past. My name's Lily. I grew up with nothing, like nothing. And I'm not saying that for pity, I'm saying that so you understand the way this all hit me, because when you're used to skipping dinner, so your mom can eat, and boiling water, because the gas got cut, and pretending you're not scared when your grandma is shaking in bed because she can't afford her pills. You don't really think about things like fate or bloodlines. You just think about today, and that day for me was about getting somebody, anybody in the rich part of town to buy some candy. Most doors didn't open. The ones that did opened just enough for someone to say no and close it in my face, and yeah, I smiled and said, "Thank you," because my mom raised me polite, but in my head I was like, "You really can't give $5 to a kid so her grandma can breathe, okay?" Then I saw the gate, the big house, the kind of house you only see in magazines or movies, where everyone whispers, "Sir, your car is ready." A man in a suit opened it. He looked important, not like security, more like the person security listens to, and I said what I always said, "Sir, would you like to buy a treat to help my grandma get medicine?" And my voice shook a little because I was tired and hungry and embarrassed, and he just stared at me for this long second and said, "Wait here." He left the door cracked, which in his world probably didn't mean anything, but in mine cracked door means curiosity, and I was 10, so I took 2 steps in, then 2 more, and that's when I saw the picture that changed everything. My mom was on that wall. Young, happy, healthy, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Arm around this same man who had just told me to wait. My body went cold. You ever feel your heart drop and your head go hot at the same time, like your brain can't catch up to what your eyes just did? Yeah, that. I was just staring at it when he came back holding money for the candy, and he stopped like he'd hit a wall. His face went white. He looked at me, he looked at the photo, then back to me again, and I asked him real quiet, "Why is my mom's picture in your house?" His mouth opened, but nothing came out for a minute, and then he asked, "What's your name?" And I said, Lily Thompson. And something in his face changed, like I'd just punched him and hugged him at the same time. He swallowed hard and asked, "Your mother's name? It's Emily, right? Emily Thompson." And I said yes, and now his hands were shaking, and he said, "Emily was my fiancée. She died over 10 years ago." I ran. I'm not proud of it. I just did. My body moved before my brain did. I grabbed my little tray, and I ran out of that house and down that perfect street, and all I could hear in my head was died. Because how are you going to tell me my mom is dead when I literally left her alive in our house that same morning, coughing, but alive, warm, but alive? I should have told her right then, but I couldn't. I didn't even know how to say the words. I just watched her that night, the way her hands trembled when she tried to pour tea, the way she pressed her palm to her chest, like it hurt to breathe. And I thought, who are you really? And what happened to you before I was born that you never talked about? The next day I went back. I know I'm just a kid in this part of the story, but listen, when you grow up broke, you grow up fast. I walked straight past the gate and right into that mansion, like nerves were a luxury item I couldn't afford. He was in the garden when I found him. He looked up, and I could see it on his face like he hadn't slept either, like he'd been replaying everything in his head all night just like I had. He stood up and said, "You came back, but..." And I didn't waste time. I walked right to that photo on his wall, and I said, "That's my mom. I'm sure of it." He came and stood next to me, and he said in this soft kind of voice people use when they're scared if they talk too loud something will break, "Her name is Emily. She was everything to me." Then he took me to his office and showed me proof. Photos. Not just rich event photos, I mean real ones. Beach pictures, cheesy selfies, forehead kisses, her laughing, with her head thrown back. Him looking at her like the sun came up just for him. And then I saw something tiny that hit me harder than all of that. In one of those pictures, my mom was wearing this little heart-shaped necklace with a blue stone in the middle. I've seen that necklace my whole life. She never takes it off. I pointed at it and said, "My mom still wears that." And he just sat down like his knees gave out, and he whispered, "I gave her that the night I asked her to marry me." And I swear, for a second, I couldn't hear anything but my own pulse. Then he looked right at me like all the air had been pulled out of his chest, and he said, "Is she alive?" I said yes. I said, "She's sick, we don't have money, it's just me and her," and I saw this look on his face, this mix of rage and hope and grief, and that's when I first understood what was happening. This wasn't some random old boyfriend. This was my mother's almost husband. This was the man who was supposed to be my father, who thought my mom died, who didn't even know I existed. I went home and told my mom everything. All of it. The house, the picture, the way he looked when I said her name. I told her he said she was dead. I told her he said she was his fiancée. I told her about the necklace. My mom just shut down. She slid down the wall and sat on the floor, and her hands were shaking so bad, I thought she was gonna pass out. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely there. "Lily," she said, "listen to me, please." And she told me the truth. She told me that yes, she loved William. His name is William Carter. Yes, they were engaged. Yes, they were happy. Yes, I was already growing inside her when everything fell apart. Then she told me about his mother. She said William's mother didn't want me around her son. She said I wasn't their kind. One night she called me in alone and said if I didn't disappear, she'd make sure I disappeared anyway. And if I ever told William about the baby, she'd come for me and she'd come for you too. I just stared at her. She kept talking, wiping tears off her face with the back of her hand, telling me how she ran in the middle of the night with basically nothing. How William's mother staged this fake story about a car crash. Even set up a funeral, told her own son not to look in the casket because it was too painful, told him to move on. My mom looked at me and said, "I didn't leave because I didn't love him. I left because I was scared I wouldn't survive long enough to meet you. I left so you could be alive. And I get it, I really do. But I'm not gonna lie, that hurt. Because all my life she told me my father died before I was born, and now I find out she's the one who disappeared, not him, and I had a father out there who didn't even know I was breathing." While all this was happening with us, William was doing his own digging. He went through his mother's old things, and he found letters. Real letters in my mom's handwriting. Stuff his mom had kept hidden, including one that mentioned the pregnancy. That was it for him. He showed up in our neighborhood. And listen, seeing a billionaire step out of a black car in a place where most people don't have working air conditioning, that alone will start conversation. A couple guys started circling like, "You lost." And then I walked out and saw him and just ran, and he dropped to his knees and hugged me like he'd been waiting his whole life to do it. He kept saying, "I'm sorry, I'm so sorry I wasn't there." And I told him, "You didn't know, it's not your fault. And it wasn't just words, I meant it." He didn't know. He'd been lied to, too. Then he met my mom face to face after more than 10 years of thinking she was dead. He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just looked at her with tears in his eyes and said, "Why didn't you tell me you were alive?" And she told him the truth, all of it. And I watched his face as she talked. Anger at what his own mother did, heartbreak at the years we lost, love so obvious, I almost had to look away. He asked if we could do a DNA test. Not because he didn't believe us, but because he said, "I need it on paper so nobody can take you from me again." And we did it, and it came back 99.9%. He's my father. After that, he started showing up not with speeches, with action. Groceries, real doctors, medicine so my mom could breathe without crying. He brought us to his house, not as charity, not like, "Oh, look at me, the hero," but like, "This is your home too, no more running." He let me pick my own room. He kept every promise. And here's the part that made me cry for real, not scared crying the other kind. One morning I couldn't zip my dress, and I said without thinking, "Dad, can you help me?" And I froze because I'd never said that word in my life, and he froze. And then he just smiled and said, "Yeah, of course." So now I want to ask you something, and I want you to really answer in the comments, because this is where people start fighting about who's right and who's wrong. If you were my mom and the rich family basically threatened to erase you and your baby, would you have run like she did, or would you have stayed and tried to fight? And what about his mother, the one who lied? Is she just evil, or is she what happens when someone with money thinks love is something they get to control? Tell me what you think. Tell me what part of this story hit you the most. And if you've ever seen somebody with power try to rewrite the truth like that, I want to hear it. And yeah, hit like and subscribe if you're still here, because trust me, this story is not done.